Would you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please. Ms. Navarre.
Chair Longstreet.
Here.
Vice Chair Clark. Here. Commissioner Cavazos. Commissioner Lesner-Buxton. Commissioner Martinez-Cohen.
Here.
Commissioner Armbruster. Commissioner Perry.
Here.
And I would like to welcome Commissioner Roger Perry, who's joining us for his first meeting tonight. Welcome aboard. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Written communications? None. Public comment. Any member of the public may address the Commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Commission that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the Commission. Seeing no one, we will close public comment. Do we have a Youth Council report today?
We do not. I think
Okay.
the Youth Council's on a bit of a summer recess.
Excellent. Well deserved. Commissioner Committee assignment reports. Ms. Clark, we'll start with you.
On Wednesday, July 19th, I attended the regular monthly board meeting of the Park Foundation, where we discussed the upcoming capital campaign to garner funds for the Cabrillo Bathhouse and Pavilion renovation.
Okay. Ms. Martinez-Cohen.
Unfortunately, I have nothing to report. I was out of town for the Creeks meeting and also for the Arts and Crafts meeting.
Thank you. And Mr. Perry, you have not received any assignments yet.
I have no assignments.
Great. I really have nothing to report at this time. Commission and staff communications. Okay, that brings us to ceremonial items. Ms. Zachary.
Chair Longstreet and members of the Commission, we had 3 staff in the Parks and Recreation Department receive service awards. In July, for 5 years of service, Mandy Burgess, who's an administrative analyst in the department, and Jessica Martinez, who's an administrative specialist in the department in Neighborhood and Outreach Services. And then Cameron Benson, our Creeks manager, received his 10-year service award, and he's in the audience today.
So congratulations, since you are the only one here. It's been great to have you for 10 years, and I remember when you first started, and I appreciate everything you do. Thank you. All right. Brings us to item 2, summary of council actions. Any questions for staff on any of the items on this list or comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the minutes. We've all had a chance to look them over. Any issues? You want to make a motion? Great.
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Perry, I assume, since you weren't around then. Yes. Okay, thank you very much. To trees, Mr. Downey.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, the first item on the agenda is 129 Castillo Street. These trees exist on a city-owned parcel that is managed by the Carriage Museum, which makes these city-owned trees and regulated by the street tree ordinance. The original request was to remove the grove of sycamores in this area, and the committee reviewed that at their June meeting. During discussion at the June meeting, the applicant expressed an interest to revise his request based on the comments he was hearing. So the committee voted to postpone the decision to July to allow time for a modification. The applicant came back with a modification to the request. Their current request is to remove one of the California sycamores closest to the fence. It's the smallest one, and to alleviate some crowding in that area. It also kind of leans over the facility, and remove 6 Mexican fan palms. The committee noted that there's a small creek adjacent to this, and that the Mexican fan palms tend to proliferate very frequently and well, and felt that the removal of the Mexican fan palms would be beneficial to the area. Their recommendation is to approve the revised request.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions of Mr. Downey? I was concerned about the creek because there has been some restoration done in that area. I know there's wildlife that lives in that creek. There's a pair of ducks that are there pretty regularly, and then some other, I'm sure, things that live there. So I'm glad to see the sycamore staying in that area. If there's no questions or comments, is there a motion to this item? We have no public speakers.
I'll make a motion to agree with the Street Tree Advisory Committee's recommendation to approve the removal of the 1 smaller near the fence California sycamore and 6 Mexican fan palms at 129 Castillo Street.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Yes, abstain. You can vote on this if you, no, okay. Yeah.
Then I vote in favor.
Okay, thank you. All righty. And then that brings us to B1.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, at 3717 Barcelona Drive is a mature Italian stone pine. This Italian stone pine, when it developed, it grew in a way that it developed defects. Usually when a tree grows, the main trunk grows, and then the side branches grow separately, and so therefore the overlapping tissues where they meet can develop a strong connection. That did not occur with this tree. There were 4 trunks, and they all developed at the same time. So they grew at the same time, so that connection never happened between the large trunks. To compensate for that, about 15 to 20 years ago, they put a cable system in to help hold the branches together. It's very large tree in between 2 garages, and the condition of the cable is no longer good enough to support the weight of the limbs. And short of extremely significant pruning and putting in new cables, the tree couldn't be preserved for much longer. The applicant is not proposing a replacement tree, but the committee felt that it was important to, after losing such an amount of canopy, to replace that canopy with something. Their recommendation, based on public safety, is that the tree be approved for removal on the condition the applicant replace with a tree that can achieve 25 feet in height somewhere within the front setback.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions of Mr. Downey? We have no public speakers for this item. No questions?
No, I would make a motion, though, to agree with the committee's recommendation to approve the removal on the condition that it is replaced with an evergreen that can achieve 25 feet at 3717 Barcelona Drive.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that, but I just wanted to back up and make a comment that this is just it's a terrible loss for the neighborhood. It's such a beautiful tree and provides so much canopy, and I think, so I am just agreeing with STAC's recommendation for a replacement tree. I know all of us considered it very carefully. We're not just taking out this gorgeous tree for no reason. It's the safety of the citizens involved. But I plunked myself on the curb and stared at it for half an hour. It was so beautiful. So if anyone's watching, nobody took this decision lightly. So I do second the motion.
Thank you, and we appreciate that. To hear that staff deliberations is important. Thank you. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for 3717 Barcelona Drive. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We are just zipping along here today, aren't we? Yeah. Next on our will be the director's report.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, just a few items to report. I suppose there could be multiple pages about what's going on this summer because there's lots going on, but just wanted to highlight a few things. First of all, we had the 4th of July, and I think Commissioner Perry played a significant role in its success, the music and entertainment. One thing that people don't realize is the day after, there's often lots of stuff left behind, and that falls to primarily the Parks Division of our department, but also the Waterfront Department, sort of clean up. And our staff are out there first thing, doing just that. This year it went extremely well. The cleanup occurred very quickly. And so in addition to the work effort of staff, I want to recognize that the people enjoying the 4th of July, and I believe the organizers also encouraged people to put trash in trash cans, which made it easier to actually clean up the beach afterward. We got a lot of kudos this year because by 8 o'clock, you almost didn't know that there was a holiday, and West Beach was pretty darn clean, which is amazing. I asked Tim Downey to stay for the next item because commissioners may have some questions, but we have a new champion tree in the city of Santa Barbara. And Mr. Downey will be able to speak to sort of the process if you have any questions. But there is a registry that keeps track of the largest specimens, and we have a new one, and it's a tree that's in Alameda Park. In your staff report, it talks about the African fern pine, which was planted in 1910, so that dates back to the creation of that park. And if you recall, last year, perhaps, or a year and a half ago, we did a presentation to you of the historic, the older parks in Santa Barbara and how we tried to figure out which trees are original trees. So this helps fill out that story. We also have two others on the Mission Rose Garden. There's a sugar gum, and then a sweet shade tree on Dibley Avenue. So we are happy that we get some more notoriety as a town with a huge species diversity compared to most California and certainly Southern California towns. It's a great way to celebrate the foresight of people many years ago to plant trees. And then lastly, the Mission Rose Garden, we have our annual event in January, which is to basically cut everything back and get ready for the next season's blooms. Well, we have, which we call the Tidy Up event, but we've also called it the Deadhead event for next Tuesday at 5 o'clock, where we're asking volunteers to come out and help us tidy it up. Partly in preparation for Fiesta, but also so that they'll continue blooming well into the remainder of the year. Should be a lot of fun. There's always the rehearsals going on at the Mission, so you get a sneak peek at Fiesta Pequeña, and inviting everyone to come out and enjoy helping out. Thank you.
That sounds like fun. Are there questions of Mr. Downey? Do you have anything to add on our trees, that how we get this great recognition?
Chair Longstreet, Commissioners, the California Big Tree Registry is managed out of Cal Poly blanking, sorry.
Is it San Luis Obispo or the other one?
The other one.
Pomona.
No, Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz. I'm sorry.
Oh, UC Santa Cruz. Okay.
UC Santa Cruz.
We'll get there. Don't worry.
And each state has their own big tree registry, and there's a national big tree registry. Not quite certain how we access the national one yet. I'm working on that one. But on the website, it lists about 200 different species. There's certain measurements that you take of the tree that give it a point value, and whichever tree has the highest point value becomes the champion tree in California. The department manages over 450 varieties of trees. Being 200 species on the page, we would have an opportunity for more champions, we're going to be selective about that and select some that maybe that really should be champions rather than try and flood the website. But again, it's an important aspect of the way that we manage our trees, that we have large trees in Santa Barbara. In addition to the ones that the city of Santa Barbara owns, there are about 20 in the geographic area here that are champion trees. So it's really important that people recognize the importance of proper care of trees so that they can become large and provide the great benefits that they do. So,
Well, thank you. Are there any questions? Well, I think it's nice to get the recognition. Our trees are important. All right. Thank you for that report. We have the annual advisory committee reports, and we receive these every year, thereby being annual. And they're just for us to stay in touch with what's happening on the various committees. So are there any questions about what we saw there? Do you have any presentation, Ms. Zachary? Thank you, though. I know it's nice to keep up with what's happening in all of the groups. And I would like to say thank you to all the people who serve on those committees and volunteer their time that we don't often see except for when we interview them. So thank you to everyone. And now we are to Arroyo Borough Open Space.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, Aaron Markey, who's a planner in the Creeks Division, will be presenting this to you today. Very exciting progress towards our new open space park.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Longstreet and Commissioners. Thanks for having me. This is the new open space park down at the lower end of the watershed. Sorry, one second. There we go. At the end of Allen Road, upstream of our previously completed Arroyo Borough Estuary and Mesa Creek Restoration Project, and downstream of the confluence with Las Positas Creek and the Stone Creek condos, just for some orientation. The park property totals about 21 acres. It's made up of the acquisition on the west side of the creek that was completed last year. It's about 14.7 acres. And then on the east side of the creek, a 6.2 acre property that was acquired by the city back in 1998. The southern portion of both parcels happen to be in the coastal zone. That's what this green boundary shows. And the property provides a great opportunity to do a meaningful restoration project here. We have about 1,600 linear feet of creek frontage between the two properties. And also just wanted to point out that the property is currently open to the public and being used for passive recreation. So we've been working over the last year to develop designs for what this restoration plan would be. We've been working with a consulting firm called Waterways Consulting as the engineers designing the project. And in addition, there's been a number of opportunities for community input along the way. Starting last year as part of Creek Week, the Santa Barbara Urban Creeks Council hosted an event at the park focused on the watershed and talked about restoration opportunities specific to this property. And then last October, we held a series of meetings with both environmental stakeholder groups and neighboring property owners and residents to talk about what could be incorporated into a future restoration design, as well as long-term park maintenance plans. And then just last month, we hosted another round of those meetings to go over the conceptual designs with the public and get feedback from them on what we're proposing to do. So just some of the existing conditions. I'm sure most of you have been out to this park, but a lot of these things aren't visible unless you trek through the poison oak and get down to the creek channel. This whole section of creek is fairly incised, which means that the channel bed has actually down cut over time. And that leads to often instability of the bank toe and then slumping and eroding of the associated creek banks. So there's a number of areas where there's active bank erosion. This is a section towards the upper north end of the property where there's just active bank erosion, lack of mature riparian vegetation as a result of that. And then in addition, because of the bank channel incision, most of the creek corridor is not able to access what historically would have been its floodplain. The creek channel is about 15 feet below these kind of upper bank terraces, and therefore we're kind of lacking natural floodplain habitat through this section. And then in addition, there's pipe and wire revetment and other concrete debris throughout the channel that's disrupting the natural hydraulic function of the creek. This is, put in to kind of stabilize banks by flood control a number of years ago. Obviously, this section isn't doing anything because it's in the middle of the creek channel in this portion. And then a mix of native and non-native vegetation. There's a number of non-natives we're concerned about, Arundodonax pictured here, as well as Cape ivy, eucalyptus trees, and a number of things that are reducing the overall habitat quality in this section. And then I just briefly wanted to talk about kind of the importance of floodplain habitat. This illustration does a really good job illustrating kind of our existing incised creek channel with very steep creek banks and this upper flood terrace, and then what we're hoping to propose to do. In this incised creek channel, your low flows are maintained, your base flows maintained in this lower portion, and then as flood flows rise up, it's not until, in this illustration, they show basically a 100-year storm event that you're getting access to this upper bank terrace. Based on kind of the hydraulic analysis that our engineers have done already of this section based on the topography, even at the 100-year storm event, we're not having flooding in these upper bank areas. And even at the 100-year storm, there's still several feet before we would get flooding up on those bank areas. And then because at this point we can no longer go in and actually raise channel elevations because that would disrupt upstream and downstream flooding elevations and impact homes downstream as well as Las Positas Road. What we're proposing to do is come in and adjacent to the existing low flow channel, grade in floodplain benches or terraces that would be accessed on a regular occurrence. So we're designing it to be accessed on the 2-year storm event, and this recreation of floodplain habitat provides multiple ecological benefits. As flood flows come up in these areas, slow down, they spread out. That slowing down and spreading out actually reduces the erosive force of those storms. It also provides an opportunity for groundwater recharge. It lowers floodplain or flood elevations, so it could reduce flood risks downstream. You also get the settling out of sediments and nutrients as those storm flows slow down. Those things often drop out, as well as an increased width of our riparian zone, so you're getting additional creek buffer as well as wildlife habitat. So with all that in mind, these are kind of the overview plan sheet of our draft concept designs. This is Allen Road over here. So this is the main park entrance at this point. And then the Stone Creek condos are just off the page. All the work that we're proposing to do is within the city parcels, and the areas that are shown in green represent those areas where we're going to go in and grade in some new floodplain habitat. And the areas in light tan represent basically just regrading and contouring of the banks to match up with existing grades. The areas in dark brown are where we have active erosion that we want to address and kind of work to restore or stabilize. In this location, there's a sewer line that is partially exposed. And then this portion up here is that bank I showed you a photo of before, where we have a very large area of erosion that we want to address and restore. And additionally, this location, we have a very steep bank that we cannot lay back because there are 5 or 6 very large mature oak trees at the top of the bank that we want to preserve. So then rather than laying the creek bank back, we're going to try and do some biotechnical bank stabilization to stabilize the toe. And then by grading this floodplain terrace on the opposite bank, we're going to relieve some of that flood flow pressure that bank receives in hopes that we can kind of stabilize it with native vegetation and long-term protect those existing oak trees. And then these are just some cross-sectional details that give you a little more of an idea of what that might look like. These are oriented looking upstream. The first one is right through the middle of that bank repair area, so lines up with this cross-section. And so you can see we're actually rebuilding this creek bank out with some engineered fill and using some large rock to stabilize the toe, planting willow poles throughout this to also help stabilize that, and possibly using large woody debris to further create habitat but also deflect flows away from this bank. And then we'll also be creating a large, wide floodplain terrace on the opposite bank. This one's going to have a little bit of an island in the middle, so it's going to operate with a more kind of secondary overflow channel on the left side. There's an existing 30-inch sycamore tree that we are working around and trying to preserve, so there will be a little bit of a high point or an island on that floodplain terrace. And then just another example, this is a little bit further downstream where we have our large oak trees at the top of this bank. We'll be doing some willow staking and coir logs to kind of protect and stabilize the toe. There's also some concrete debris that we'll be removing from this section. And then on the right side of the creek bank, we'll be grading in this large, wide floodplain terrace. So you can see existing grades shown here with this dotted line. And we'll be removing considerable amount of soil to create this floodplain habitat. And this is just a rendering which our engineers put together to kind of show what the site will look like once it's revegetated. And this was something we really tried to highlight with the community, that there will temporarily be the disturbance of this area and loss of some vegetation. Primarily in these areas, we're talking about non-native Arundo Donax and other non-natives, but there will be a considerable amount of native arroyo willow removed. And we're going to be salvaging as many tree stakes as we can off those willow trees and reusing that in our revegetation efforts. We are working to preserve all the existing large oaks and sycamore trees. That was something that was important to us and the public. Willows are a very fast-growing species, so we know that they will recover within a few years. And this section of creek is perennial, which is really important habitat-wise, but also will help with the reestablishment of the vegetation long-term. Those plants will be able to tap into that perennial flow and take off and really fill in the site quickly. Similar to what happened down at Mesa Creek. If everyone remembers, that's now about 10 years old, and we have 30 to 40 foot tall trees in that area. So some of the project outcomes, we're going to remove over 300 feet of pipe and wire revetment, 60 cubic yards of concrete, additional debris that I'm sure we'll uncover as we get started. We'll increase access to over an acre of floodplain habitat and restore 500 feet of eroding creek banks. We'll remove non-native vegetation throughout the 4.5 acre project site. So that includes Arundo, Cape Ivy, a number of others, including 16 eucalyptus trees that are down within the riparian zone. We're going to be planting over 5,000 native container plants, including 475 trees. So oaks, sycamores, cottonwoods, and alders. I didn't include willows in that number, so those are our taller, mature riparian trees. And additionally, in the next iterations of design, we're going to include some access points to the creek. This is something the public has asked for, and we want to provide kind of defined access points where people can safely get down to the creek and also not be disturbing existing habitat resources, as well as further eroding creek banks. And also the installation of interpretive signage, which was another comment we got from the public. So our next steps, we're currently hoping to have our next iteration of designs completed in the fall, at which point we'll start kind of our environmental permitting process. and hopefully have that as well as our final construction designs and bid specifications together in the spring, so that we can take the project out to bid next April. And then we're estimating to start construction sometime in July or August of next summer. And that's basically dependent on nesting bird activity on site and when we can actually get started. And we're expecting about 2 months to complete the civil heavy grading construction portion of the project and 2 months to complete the landscaping, which is the erosion control, planting, and irrigation, all to be completed by the end of November so we can get out of the creek before the rainy season. And with that, I'll take questions.
Do we have questions of staff? Yes, Ms. Clark.
I have a question, but before I ask it, I just want to say that this is a beautiful and well-needed project. Thank you so much for all your hard work. I like the idea of access points, but are they going to be camouflage access points that look like they're not supposed to be access points, but will lead teenage neighborhood boys to the creek via the access point without them knowing they're being channeled? Because I think just picturing the boys I know in the neighborhood, they would gravitate towards something that looks like they shouldn't be using.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Clark, those are details that they weren't included in this portion of the design work, and we'll definitely consider as we move forward. There was interest from the community groups and neighborhood members that came to the meetings to have some opportunities, because currently people are kind of making their own opportunities and trampling, right, in some places native wildlife, and in some places accessing really steep creek banks where they're actually kind of leading to more erosion. So we thought, providing them some access point. We have talked about putting in split rail fencing to kind of discourage access in other areas. Maybe that's something to be determined and discussed in the future if providing those access points is not a good or feasible idea.
Okay, thank you. I think just my recommendation would be, when you move to that point, maybe remind the engineers that there will be people who like to climb over and under stuff, so maybe make it safe for the creek bed to be trampled on in that area.
Yeah.
I'm not expressing myself well, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I will add that one of the other groups that has come to a number of these meetings is Explore Ecology, and they're definitely interested in bringing school groups out there or having that be included as part of their kind of creek monitoring programs as access points where they could go down and show kids the water and take macroinvertebrate samples to assess the health of the watershed. So it would definitely be safe access points, and that's kind of the goal, is limiting those access points to just 1 or 2 areas.
Other questions or comments? This is moving remarkably quickly. I'm really impressed, as Ms. Clark said, with the quality of this design and the speed it feels like that it's going. I look forward to it as having watched the Arroyo Burro estuary project and how beautiful it is now. And in the beginning, it was a little sparse, and we all kind of looked at it and went, whoa. But it's gorgeous, and I assume this will be exactly the same way. And what a treat to be able to connect more and more of that watershed. So, thank you very much. You have a question? Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment. Yeah, I think the 4-month total construction period is pretty impressive to be done before the winter. I think it seems like an immense amount of acreage to do that in such a short amount of time. So I like that. I'm hopeful that you could keep to that time frame. It seems like you can. You've obviously done a ton of research, even just to the design point. But I think it looks great. I'm really excited to see how it turns out. And I think any landscaping project, it always takes a couple of years for things to really look good when you first do it. So it's good that you have a couple of examples that you can go back to the public with and show them, well, when we first did it, it looked like this, 5 years later this, 10 years later now it's mature. So I think that's important. Most people don't realize, how long it takes plants to grow, and that, of course, when you first do it, it's not going to look as intended. So I think you're doing a great job, though. It's a really great project.
Okay, anything else? And as far as access, I know that's always a line we walk in a restoration project, because telling the public, this is habitat, please don't let your dog run loose, versus, an open space that everybody wants ownership of. So I know we'll have some challenges in that area, but I do believe the city has met those before, and we'll do it here. So I'm glad you're planning for it. Thank you. So that is the end of our agenda today. I think this is a record meeting in my 22 years. We are out in 40 minutes. Are we meeting in August, Ms. Zachary?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, we'd like to keep the August meeting on the calendar for
Okay.
now and check in with you. There's a couple of tree items that you probably need to review. We'll know more next Thursday after the Street Tree Advisory Committee meets. And then, depending on everyone's schedule, if we have a really short business meeting and you'd like to do a site visit somewhere while the days still have daylight later into the afternoon, we might come up with some suggestions for you to consider and coordinate that as well and go from there.
Okay, that's a good idea. I'd like to wish everybody a safe and happy fiesta. It's coming faster than many of us are ready for. So with that, I will adjourn this meeting. And thank you, Mr. Perry. Welcome aboard again. Good night.